Hi, thank you for joining me for the police and hospital advocacy response for new counselors who want to go on the schedule to be an advocate. So I'm very grateful that you're all interested in this, and the response has been good. We've had a lot of people say this has really helped them feel prepared, and it actually turned out to be better than shadowing because shadowing we cannot control if all the steps can be taken because it's up to the patient whether they're going to complete the forensic collection or not. And so this is a really important training that I think will become a new standard for our future. So thank you. First, we're going to talk about some terms. When I'm talking about the attending nurse, that's the nurse who serves as central coordinator for all the patient's care, and they bridge the gap between the patients, the families, the doctors, and everybody else who's working with that patient. When we're talking about the forensics kit, we're talking about the sexual assault evidence collection kit and the patient who is also the survivor. But for this training, when we're talking about hospital advocacy, we're going to refer to them as the patient because that really helps set the precedent for the environment that they're in. And the same is the sexual nurse examiner. SO is any significant others, friends, families, partners, parents, siblings who are there who are non-offending. Mm. In triage, that's part of the emergency room where hospital staff sort and prioritize patients in an emergency department, and it's based on the severity of their conditions and what they're coming in for. And sexual assault survivors are supposed to be prioritized because we've learned that moving them from the waiting room and putting them into a room, a private room where the forensic collection can be done, is really important because it can be very uncomfortable for a patient who is a survivor sitting out in that waiting room. And VC that's the Massachusetts Victim Compensation Program, and it's right now it's managed by MOVA, and MOVA provides financial assistance to victims of crime for expenses like medical care, funeral costs, mental health counseling, loss of wages, and other things that the survivors can be reimbursed for. So they have to pay it first and submit the receipts. The only thing that they don't have to pay for, of course, is the forensics collection. But as of the past couple of years, victim compensation pays for the hospital visit. Nobody pays for the forensic collection that's provided by the state of Massachusetts. But the hospital stay, the 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 doctor's time, the nurse's time, any medications, those for the past couple of years have been paid through MOVA. So filling out the victim compensation form while you're at the hospital with the patient is really important because that's going to be how that hospital stay gets paid for. That's if they have the funds. If they do not get the funds collected, then unfortunately that will have to be paid by their insurance or out of pocket. And here's what the schedule looks like. You can see different color shifts have different amounts, and they're based on how difficult it is to fill those shifts. So the weekend evening shifts, midnight shifts are $30, and then the weekday shifts, midnight shifts are $25, and the weekday daytime shifts are $20. And that's just for being on call. So you get that whether you go on a response or not. $20 is what these stipends are what you could be paid just for being on call. And then there's an additional stipend for if you go on a call. So here are these stipends. It's a little hard to read, but we have $50 if it's under an hour, and if it's over an hour, it's $100 on top of the shift stipends. So Aliciana can answer any questions that you might have about the schedules. We want to talk about being prepared to be on call because one thing that I have learned, and that I think a lot of advocates have learned, is preparing ahead of time really makes going out in the middle of the night a lot easier. Because so it's important to try to get enough sleep. So go to bed at a decent time. If your shift doesn't start till midnight, if you go to bed at 9 o'clock, then you know you've got a few hours before you have to wake up and go out. So try to get enough sleep. Try to eat nourishing and healthy foods before you eat. Nothing before you go to sleep. Nothing that's going to give you acid reflux or upset your stomach or anything like that. Making sure that you stay hydrated and that you hydrate your gas tank because we're going to need to make sure that you can get there safely without having to run out of gas. And there's urgencies when the call comes in, whether it's a police call or a hospital response. Um, Getting gas at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock at night can be very difficult and it could slow down your response time. So we're hoping that you're filling your gas tanks prior to being on call. Also, make sure you have a routine. So, for instance, if you wake up feeling groggy or a little bit slow, I know when I wake up, I have a lot of aches and pains. So, I might have to walk around, do some stretching routines, make self, I'm waking my body up so I can be prepared to leave the house and drive my car. So, you want to walk around the house, maybe get a glass of water, use the facilities. If you're communicating another language like ASL, sometimes you have to stretch those fingers and get those loose and able to start talking. It's important to understand that you might be woken up in the middle of the night to support somebody in crisis. So we have to be on our best. And although your sleep may be broken, there's no reason that you shouldn't fall asleep. The only thing is, if you can't wake up from a ringing phone, then we'll have to think of something else. There's some apps that you can get that might help your phone flash, or make sure your volume is turned up really high. Make sure it's on vibrate. So, you know, if you have your phone on the nightstand, the vibrating will hopefully also be an indicator for you. So before you shift and before you lie down for the rest of the night, make sure you shower because showering after you called out, that's going to take too much time. We have an hour to respond to a call. Now, if it takes you a little bit more than an hour to get there, just make sure when you're calling either the individual or the hospital back or the sane nurse back, make sure you give them what your ETA is so they'll know, oh, it's been an hour and a half. I haven't seen the advocate yet. Well, you know, they're asking you to go up to Gardner. You might be in Southbridge. That's going to take a little while. Lay out your clothes so you don't have to decide what to wear. And we dress in business comfortable. Comfortable is really important, but business. We want you to look good, but in comfortable clothing. So, you know, sneakers. Absolutely. If you have sneakers, wear sneakers because we don't know if there's some dampness on the floor. It might be slippery. We don't want anybody to fall on those hard hospital floors or the police linoleum floors. Dress in layers, even in the summertime, because we can't control the temperature of the police stations or the hospitals. And I don't know about you, but hospitals are always cold for me. And so we want to make sure that you have something to put on or something to take off if it's hot, and that you'll be comfortable. Make sure that you have water or some cold drink. We've had some advocates in the past who say, oh, I know I'm on call tonight at midnight. I'm going to stop at Dunkin's and get my iced coffee and put it in the refrigerator so I'll have something if I get called out. And if they don't get called out, they'll have it for the next morning. Make sure you have cash in your wallet in case you do need to get gas for parking, for tipping the valet if you choose to use the valet. And pack your patience because we can hope things will go well, but we cannot make sure everybody is going to behave, everybody's going to be cooperative. So pack your patience. And I can guarantee if you go to the hospital, they may be a little frustrated because maybe they had a busy night. You might go in the back into the ER and see that there's patients in the hallways because there's not enough rooms. The patients that you're going to visit should be in a room. They should not be in the hallway because they cannot do the forensics collection out there. Um, but that's going to create some difficult environments for the folks who are in the hallways. So pack your patients. Make sure that you have all the needed supplies with you. Prior to your shift, contact Feliciana or me to let us know that you need to stop by the office, pick up some materials, and the materials that you're going to need. Hopefully you have your agency badge, or maybe you haven't picked it up yet, and you can get that from us. You want to take at least 2 or 3 advocacy packets with you and have, at least 2 different sizes of clothing because we can't determine what size the patient is. Now, if they're a size small, they might be able to wear a medium. So don't worry about if the clothing is going to be a little bit too snug or a little bit too loose. We use sweatpants and sweatshirts, so if they're a little bit baggy, we can just tighten up the drawstring, or they can tighten up their drawstring, and at least it'll leave the hospital far more comfortable than in a Johnny. We also have attending nurses appreciation gifts. So remember, the attending nurse is not the same nurse. They're the nurse who is there to help make the stay of the patient a little bit more comfortable. And we give them presents because we appreciate their role. We appreciate them calling sane. We appreciate them calling us, and we appreciate them being supportive of that survivor. And then we also have notebooks. The appreciation gifts for the nurses have notebooks in them, but it's also okay to take a couple notebooks for the sane, for the police. Take one for yourself too, because you might need a pen and paper to write some notes down. And this is what your badge will look like. That's the front and back. And this is what the advocacy packet looks like. And there's lots of information there. It's actually a folder with lots of information. We have our hotline on both hotlines on the printed on the folder. And yeah, lots of information. And here are the bags that have some advocacy clothes in them. And this is the file folder where you can get the advocacy clothes out of. And we have them all sorted by size. So choose carefully because somebody might have said, oh, I don't want this one, and threw it in the wrong. We try very hard to keep them organized, but unfortunately, they don't always stay organized. So here's what the folder looks like open. That's the packet for the attending nurse, and these are all the goodies. In that blue and gray, that is the notebook that I was talking about. Police love that notebook. Say nurses love that notebooks. Nurses love that notebooks. And there's lots of other little goodies in there. I will send you out an email that has a kind of display of what the packet has, the nurses gift packet has. So you'll be able to, I'm really hoping there's some charms in there that I'm hoping that will become collector items for them. A little bit of chocolate to keep them energy up, a stress ball, and lots of thank you notes. So it's important to understand that we have safety procedures, and those are in place because we can never forget that we are working with victims of crime. And remember, this is a crime where most of the perpetrators do not get arrested. So you could be going to a hospital call or a police station, and the perpetrator was never picked up and may never be picked up. Remember, in Massachusetts, we have, well, in central Massachusetts, we have probably about a 30% reporting rate amongst our survivors, which is a little bit higher than the standard in the country. But still, regardless of that, probably less than 1% of them get convicted of sexual assault crimes, but most of them get pled down if they even get a conviction to assault and battery, and there's seldom jail time involved with that. So remember, those offenders are rarely in prison, but it's essential that we know that you are safe So you might be going alone to the hospital, to the police stations, but understand you're not alone in spirit because the dispatcher is going to be your point of contact if you need anything, if you have any questions, or just need to talk to somebody. When they text you the response information, be sure to acknowledge that you received the information. Unfortunately, over the years, we've had counselors who have taken the information and then just gone, but never confirmed with the dispatcher that they received the information. It wasn't until they're at the hospital or at the police station, oh yeah, I got it, I'm here. Like, we don't know that though, so communication is essential. After you receive the information and said, got it, thumbs up, whatever you want to do to help the dispatcher understand that you received it, then call the number they gave you. The number could be a hospital, could be a SANE nurse, it could be a survivor. It's seldom the police station because the police very seldom call our hotline. But oftentimes a survivor will call the hotline and say, I'm going up to the police station, could an advocate join me? So when you call, let them know what time you're going to arrive at the facility, whether it's the survivor or some nurse or some hospital personnel or SANE nurse. Let them know what time you're going to be there, and make sure you let the dispatcher know when you've arrived at the hospital. That's number one of our safety procedures. So you got to let us know when you arrive so we know you got there safely. During the response, contact the dispatcher if you have any questions or challenges, and use that number that we just texted you when we sent you the information. And also, when you're leaving the facility, let them know you're leaving. When you're leaving the police station, when you're leaving the hospital, let them know that you're leaving. And I'll tell you, I don't mind if people let me know when they're home because I'm a worrywart. And I always appreciate, say, somebody says, I'm home. I say, great, get some sleep. But I appreciate that. So when the call comes in, it'll come in from the dispatcher. The dispatcher will text you the following information: the facility name, the caller's name. Remember that caller could be a survivor, and we'll say whether it's a nurse or a survivor, we'll let you know, and we'll give you the callback number. And if it's a patient, we'll let you know what room the patient's in because that's going to help you when you get to the hospital. Confirm the address, the facility's address and name when you call them. So if you're calling back as a survivor, say you're going to the Worcester Police Department over on 911 Lincoln Square, and confirm that. And you'll know we have a lot of UMasses in central Massachusetts. So they're all UMass memorials of different campuses. So if it's UMass University we give you, then confirm that address. They should tell you it's on One Lake Ave. If it's UMass Memorial Campus, that should be on Bell Hill. And then make sure you're confirming the address because it's not unheard of for an advocate to go to the wrong hospital because they didn't confirm the address. Share with them your first name. Let them know what time you're going to be there. And if it's a police advocacy, let the survivor know how to recognize you because they've never seen you before. So I'll tell them, I'm wearing a gray fleece and I have a teal flowery shirt on. I'm a woman of size. I have medium length wavy hair. And so I'll say these things and then I'll just help them know, okay, where should we meet? Should we meet in the parking lot? Should we meet in the waiting area? And of course, let the hospital know what your ETA is. So when a call comes in, what if a call comes in 10 minutes before your shift ends? That stinks, right? We will try to reach the next advocate, but if the next advocate isn't on until till 6 a.m. and it's now 5:50 a.m., they might still be at their work, so they may not be able to leave. If they're not able to go, then the expectation is that you are still going to fulfill that shift and go on that response. If you want to call down the list of advocates, you're welcome to, but understand we don't have a lot of time. So you have to do that quickly and then know when it is to give up on making those phone calls. Because we don't want you at home for an hour making those phone calls when a patient needs you or a survivor needs you. If you cannot respond to the request or refuse to respond, then you will lose the shift stipend and it will go to whomever is going to respond. And I'm sorry if this feels harsh. We don't want to be harsh, but we really are that determined to make sure that if we can support a survivor, we're going to support the survivor. And unfortunately, we don't have enough advocates to cover all the shifts. So if a call comes in at 5:50 a.m. and your shift ends at 6 and there's nobody on at 6 a.m., then unfortunately you're going to have to go. So plan your life accordingly. We have to do our best to honor the schedule. So when you arrive at the police station, text the dispatcher, meet the individual in the area that you agreed to, whether that's the parking lot. Hopefully it'll be the waiting area inside the police facility because that feels a little bit safer to me. Or call them if you cannot find them. Remember, you have that number in your text. When you find the survivor, show them your Pathways badge. And survivors should be the one to check in at the reception desk. You cannot check in. Help the survivor understand you cannot speak for them. We do not want you going up to the police station saying, I'm a rape crisis advocate, because that isn't as helpful as you think it might be. Because police are like lawyers. Anything that's shared with them has to go in the report. And then if they bring this to the DA's office, they have to share it with the DA. And the DA has to share it with the defense team. So if it does go to trial, the defense will have that. So if you share that you're their rape crisis counselor, police puts that in the report. They will give that to the DAs. The DA knows that they're getting rape crisis support. And then the DA will have to let the defense team know. And I can guarantee the defense team is going to try to subpoena our records. It will have nothing in there, but it still makes some really unneeded stress for the survivor and for the agency and for the advocate. So for police advocacies, follow the directions of the police that they advise you to do. If they say wait in the waiting area, you wait in the waiting area. So who do I tell them if I am? If I can't tell them you're just their friend. You're there to support them. So if they say wait in the waiting area, that's what you do. Waiting in the waiting area doesn't mean you get to leave. It just means you're going to wait till the survivor is done, then to provide them support. Maybe not in the waiting area because that wouldn't be confidential. So this is when you go out to your cars and you can provide support there. You cannot go in their car. They cannot go in your car. So it's best not to share with the PD that you're a rape crisis counselor. While not in front of the police, share this reason and why with the individual, because again, we do not want it to get reported in the report that travels down the line, and we don't want to be subpoenaed down the road. Remind the individual that they do not have to share that they're receiving rape crisis support, as it will become part of their record. It will become part of the report and will become part of the court report. So when the survivor has completed their statement, check in with them to see how they're doing. Ask them if they would like you to give them a call in a day or two to just check in, see how they're doing, see if any questions came up, see if any emotions came up for them. Be sure to let them know about the victim compensation, and if they haven't completed the application, they can schedule with their Pathways for Change counselor to complete it. So the difference between the application outside the hospitals is the hospital application is only a one-pager. All the other applications are 4 pages. Why they're different, I don't know. But that's why we would have a counselor come in and provide that support while they fill out the application. We're not going to fill it out for them. but we can certainly fax it for them from our office, which solves a lot of problems. When you're ready to leave the police station, text the dispatcher and let them know you're going home. And if you'd like, text us when you're home. Because again, I'm a worry ward, and I'm absolutely okay if you text me when you get home. Don't text me when you get home. Say, sorry, I forgot to text you when I left. Text me when you leave and when you get home. So let's talk a little about language. Generally, the forensic kit are called rape kits, and you can even hear them in the news being called that. But at Pathways, we don't like that term. Why is that? Well, rape is not the only sexual violence crime that happened and that the kits can be submitted for. All different types of sexual violence, right? Also could be triggering for a client to hear rape kit, rape kit, rape kit. We don't want to trigger our clients. The proper name is Sexual Assault Evidence Collection Kit. That's a mouthful, so we can call it the kit or we can call it forensic kit. We don't have to use sexual assault evidence collection kit. Just the kit or a forensic kit is absolutely fine. And here's what the kit looks like. Now I'm going to play a video and we're going to watch that video. So give me a moment. You know, I am klutzy.
A hospital emergency room with a sexual assault nurse examiner on staff is trained to take steps to assess a sexual assault victim's injuries, relieve mental anguish and physical pain, and act to prevent pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. They also collect evidence for possible criminal prosecution. Sexual assault examination kits, or rape kits as they are commonly called, manufactured by the Searchy Company and provided to hospitals across Ohio, contain the needed tools and a checklist of steps to guide examiners through the process of forensic evidence collection following a sexual assault. Although the boxes look alike, every victim is different. The nurse examiner will use professional judgment to tailor the examination to the individual circumstances. Patients will also be offered an advocate to support them through the process. Also, while the typical victim depicted here is female, male victims of sexual assault undergo a similar process, slightly tailored to their different needs. But in broad terms, here are the steps the kit recommends. First, the patient is asked to give consent for the examination. This consent isn't a one-time yes or no, but rather a cooperative and ongoing process. The patient can consent to some parts of the examination and decline others. The consent may be withdrawn at any time. The narrative of the attack is then established. The victim tells her story. How she describes the attack, as well as how much of it she can remember, will help determine which steps in the evidence gathering process may be the most important. Now the victim undresses. Examiners search for injuries and soreness on their body. Then the nurse swabs for possible evidence outside of the body, as well as conducting careful internal examination of the vaginal and cervical areas. This is a difficult time for most patients, and the nurse and advocate stay engaged to try to keep things as light and calm as possible. The next steps involve collecting samples from the victim's body. Some or all of these samples may be collected depending on the type of assault, although some of them are always required. A victim advocate can stay with the victim if they wish. And again, consent for any part of the examination may be withdrawn at any time. For example, an examiner would collect urine, head hair, pubic hair if present, oral swabs, fingernail scrapings, swabbings and cuttings, swabs of the anal and perineal area, swabs of the vaginal area, or penis if the victim is a male. And if drugs, such as date rape drugs, are believed to have been involved in the assault, blood samples. The victim's clothing is collected, examined for stains that may be sampled, and carefully packaged so that no unseen hair or fiber evidence is lost. The victim's care continues with treatment for trauma and injuries, as well as testing and preventative care for pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. Meanwhile, the rape kit forms and samples are carefully sealed in their box, with the kit's chain of custody carefully monitored and noted as the contents make their way to potentially be submitted as evidence of a crime. That's if a victim makes the choice, and the choice ultimately does lie with the victim to officially report the crime.
When someone listens to you and makes you feel special, how could you suspect that they have something else in mind? When I felt lonely.
So, so as you can see from this video, they use the wrong language, the language that we don't like in pathways. But the reason why I've shown this video is the Massachusetts SANE program has impacted all the other sexual assault programs across the country. They have been used as the model. So that's why when you go to a hospital, you'll see the forensics collection kit looks like this. Only the font might be a brighter blue. It will say Massachusetts on it, but it's going to look very similar. We all follow, thankfully, a similar protocol. So when you arrive at the hospital, after you text the dispatcher to let them know that you're there, head over to triage, let them know that your patient advocate there to help a patient in whatever room number the dispatcher gave you. Sometimes we don't know. Very rarely we don't know. But you say, I'm a patient and this nurse called me in to help this patient. I don't know what the room number is. So make sure that you give them the nurse's name. Show them your Pathways for Change badge. Follow their instructions. You might be given a visitor's pass. You may be asked to wear a mask. You cannot argue with that. Some of the hospitals do have mask mandates. Most of them are voluntary mandates. But if you have a little bit of a stuffy nose because of allergies, it's never a bad idea to wear a mask because you can't prove to them you don't have COVID. We're still a little bit on edge about that time. And most of the hospitals have security areas now. So they're going to ask you to go through security check, which means metal detectors, which means they're going to have to open up your bags, open up your packet, look through, open up your purse if you're carrying a purse. or backpack they're going to have to look through. And there's a reason for that. The hospitals over the years have had some unfortunate luck with people becoming violent, and some hospital staff have gotten injured. And so because of that, they need to make sure that everybody that they're letting into the emergency room is a safe person and does not have any weapons on them. So just like you're going through TSA at the airport, be patient, follow their instructions. And understand hospital staff, including the security, might be stressed out. So be patient, be calm, smile, and be cooperative. Sometimes hospital calls include police advocacy. You'll get there and find out the police are there. So on your advocacy form, make sure you document that the police were there. So you'll be reported that you're doing a medical and a police advocacy response, all in one-stop shopping. Police may have already been called, and you may or may not be allowed into the room when the patient is giving their statement. If you're allowed in the room, chances are the police are going to ask who you are. We can't ignore that this is a police advocacy response in the medical setting. Be sure that the police advocacy is included in the reporting along with reporting the hospital response. If they ask you who you are in this situation, you got to tell them, I'm a patient advocate. They may take your name down and they may act all suspicious of you, but you deserve to be there. You were called and you deserve to be there. And even rarely, the patient may ask for a compliment to the police station after the forensics has been collected. So they're done with the hospital and say, okay, now I'm going to go to the police station and file a report. You cannot drive them. You cannot drive with them. You say, okay, give me the address of which one you're going to, and I'll meet you there. Thankfully, you know each other, so you don't have to go through all of the hassle of when you contact them first time on the phone. And if this is the case, be sure you let the dispatcher know, okay, I'm leaving the hospital, but now following them to the police station because they're going to be giving a statement to the police there. And then when you leave the police station, make sure that you are also checking in for the final time. Okay, I'm on my way home. I'm done. And then, of course, you can let me know when you get home because I'm a worrywart. But again, you can't transport a client at any time. We do not have the insurance for it, and you could get into a lot of trouble for doing that because of that. So if they do need transport, then you can give the dispatcher a call. Check with the hospital, see if the hospital can do it, or call your dispatcher and see if we can call a cab. We have some cab. We cannot call an Uber or Lyft. We do not do ride shares because unfortunately they're in the news far too often with doing some unfortunate behavior. But we might be able to call a cab for them if they're in the Worcester area and some of the surrounding towns, like if they need to go to Auburn or Millbury, we can call New Red Cab. And the dispatcher will be, you give the dispatcher the information, the dispatcher will make that call for you. And then hopefully they'll be able to get the patient home as well. We can call another cab for them to get home. Now, if the hospital has the resources, we try to lean on the hospital because they have far more resources than a little rape crisis center. But we will do whatever we can to make sure that patient can stay safe. So when you get to the hospital and are shown to the patient's room, you've gone through the security, you're in the back room, there's the people in the hallway, lots of noises and bells and whistles going on. They're going to show you, okay, this is the room that you're going to be in. Sometimes Satan will meet you outside the room. You can introduce yourself there. But if you're shown in the room, make sure you're saying hello to the patient first because that's why you're there. And then say hello to everybody else in the room. So we want to make sure that the patient understands we're there for them and them first. Okay? Let the patient know that you're there to support them, that this is going to be no cost to them, that this is a free service, and If and when there's nobody else in the room, including sane, including staff, including families, if the patient wants to share something, let them know that they should share it when there's nobody else in the room because we have we can have access to confidential information. But if sane hears it or if hospital hears it, they likely will document it in the file or in the records that they're creating. So we need to understand that confidentiality and let the patient know that if they want confidentiality, then they need to wait until it's just you and them in the room. Otherwise, it may be, again, documented for part of the forensic collection in the hospital records. In that case, we can't control the confidentiality. It's all done. It's out there. So when you first meet the patient, let the patient know who you are, that you're from Pathways for Change, which is the Rape Crisis Center in Central Massachusetts. Not everybody's going to know who Pathways for Change is, so I say Pathways for Change, the Rape Crisis Center in Central Massachusetts, and that you're there to support them, and there's no cost for this service. Again, SANE may not be attending because they're not always able, they do really good at filling their schedule most of the time, but they're not always able to. In fact, we just had a couple months where they didn't have enough SANE nurses, and there was a big statewide SANE training, so they got some new folks, so hopefully they can fill the shifts now. But if it's not the SANE, then the hospital has to assign usually a staff nurse person to do the forensic collection. Sometimes the doctor, but usually not the doctor. Usually really nurse, and they might be a little salty because they have to do the forensic collection. They might try to turn to you and say, hey, tell me what to do. We can't tell them what to do. The only thing we should be telling them is that they can't leave the kit alone. Once it's opened up, if they need anything, ask you. You can get the patient some water. You can get the patient a warm blanket. You can get them some sterile scissors if they need. You can get them a new blood vial if their blood vial in the kit is expired. Let them know you can do these things because they cannot leave the kit. Otherwise, you cannot help them collect anything. You cannot touch anything of the kit or help them collect any of the forensics because that is their role as the person doing the forensics collection. And even if you're aware of any of the steps, you might remind the nurse, but in a very diplomatic way, because we're not 100% certain. And again, you can't touch the kit. Again, you can remind them not to leave the kit once it's opened. And if they need anything, you can run to the nurse's station and ask on their behalf. Let the patient know that you can stay as long as you need versus saying you can leave whenever they would like. Why do we say it this way? Well, because I can stay as long as you like puts the emphasis on staying versus I can leave whenever you'd like. It puts the emphasis on leaving. We want the patient to know that we are willing to stay as long as they need us. Let the patient know if they're going to do the forensic kit that you have a sweatshirt and sweatpants if their clothes or their pants are going to be taken as part of the forensics collection. If they do not have the kit, then please do not give them the clothes. It's not a souvenir for getting a patient advocate at the hospital. So that costs us a lot of money. So please do not give them the clothes unless that means they have to leave in a Johnny because it was collected. However, the only time that I would give out the clothes is if the patient is an unhoused person. It is not uncommon that the patient is unhoused, and that clothes could mean a lot to them. Could mean, if it's wintertime, staying a little bit warmer out there on the streets. So the patient may prefer that the family partner stays in the room, so you may have to leave the space. So there's room. Those hospital rooms are very small. So They can't fit more than 2 or 3 people. But again, this is not permission to leave the hospital. Asking you to leave the room doesn't mean you're leaving the hospital. Let them know that you can wait in the waiting area or other identified. Sometimes there's family rooms that you can go to. Some advocates will just ask for a chair and sit outside the room, so they're close by if they're needed. If the patient says that they're all set and it's good for you to go, then you can leave the hospital. Again, it's all about what the patient's needs are. Remember, you're there first for the patient who is also the survivor. You're also there for significant others, but don't share anything that the patient may have shared with you to their friends and family. Talking to the significant others about healing, the healing process is great. Help them understand that our services are there for them as well as the patient. Give the significant other space to share their feelings while gently correcting any victim blaming language. And if those feelings are really harsh or really strong, step out of the room with them and go to a private space for you to have a conversation, because we don't want their feelings to be a burden for the patient. So again, if necessary, see if there's a private room or go into the waiting area so the patient doesn't have to be burdened by the significant other's feelings. Understand that same needs to spread out. There's I think over 20 steps to the kit. They're not necessarily going to do them all. It's all dependent on the story that the survivor tells them. They'll decide if there wasn't any penetration, then it's probably not worth doing an internal, not worth putting the patient through that stress. So they'll swab areas that the patient says, they touch me here, they touch me here, they touch my shoulder. They'll swab those areas. And they can't put the swabs away back into the kits until they're fully dried. So they have to spread them out so they'll have room to dry. So understand there's very little space for us. And if you are allowed to stay in the room, and chances are you're probably going to be, oftentimes it's easier to have the advocate in the room than a mom or dad or a friend. And why is that? It's because they don't want their loved one to hear the story about what happened to them. They don't want that image in their head. And so asking them to leave and you to stay is really about protecting their family and their friends. It's important to understand that the forensic collection is a legal process. So while SANE's talking, do not interrupt unless the patient is struggling to understand the terms that the SANE is using. For instance, I was supporting a 12-year-old one time, and the SANE nurse was using big words like ejaculation. And the 12-year-old looked at me and she didn't know what that meant. And I had to say, "Excuse me, nurse, do you mind explaining the terms? Because I think we need a little help with understanding some of the words." Really wanted to say was, "Oh my gosh, this is a 12-year-old. Be careful with the language you're using," but I didn't. I was diplomatic and I used my patience and remained calm. If you sense the patient needs a break because they're overwhelmed, it's okay to say, "Is it okay if we take a little break?" And just give the patient some time to catch their breath. It's important to understand that we're not medical experts, so we should not import our own medical thoughts or advice. For instance, if you find out PEP is not going to be offered, remember PEP is the post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. And if the patient is at high risk for HIV and it's within that time frame that Pamela had shared during the medical session of the training, then that might be another reason why PEP isn't being offered. Something that you don't know, something that's in their medical records. Maybe the hospital already knows that they have HIV, or maybe there's other medical concerns. Maybe they have kidney disease, and the PEP medication is really, really difficult on kidneys and could cause kidney failure. So there's lots of reasons why they may not be considering PEP. It's important that we're not bringing that up, though. If you have a chance to quietly ask the SANE a question, outside of the hearing range of the survivor. And if that's helpful, then do so. Otherwise, we're not the experts. The SANE nurses and the medical staff are the experts. The patient may ask you to step out of the room because the room is too cramped. Or the patient usually asks the significant other to step out of the room, and you can stay during the forensic collection. You might get some angry looks from the family, like, why do they get to stay? They don't even know you. Like, well, patient and SANE wants you to stay, I can rest assured. And the patient will be better well supported if you stay. You use your instinct. If you feel the significant other needs support, please provide that support to them as well. And if that means stepping out of the room, letting them know about our services is there for them as well, that's fantastic. While SANE is setting up the collection supplies, this might be a good time to go over victim compensation form. Some advocates like to wait to the end. I like to do it when there's some quiet. Even if I don't bring it out to the nurse's station to fax it yet, at least I'll have it started. So when the patient starts getting tired or fed up with all the questions, that process is already taken care of. And then if there's any other information I need, I can fill in the blanks as time goes on. And you can help them fill out the victim compensation by doing this by asking the patient the questions that are on the form on their behalf, filling it out for them, or finding the pen if the patient wants to fill it out themselves. And also ask them if there's a safe address that they can give. So the address doesn't have to be exactly where they're living. What if they were living with the perpetrator? And that perpetrator chances are could come back. They don't want necessarily the perpetrator seeing they're getting mail from victim compensation. So maybe they can have their mail sent to a trusted friend's home or a trusted family member's home. Somebody who feels safer to receive this information. So that's the address that should go down on the form. So once the application is complete, make sure that the kit number, when the SANE opens the kit, then they should give you probably a whole strip of numbers. You can put one number on the victim compensation form, as you put one number on the aftercare form, another number on some of the, I will plaster the numbers all over the place. I'll usually hold on to one or two just in case. And then if I don't use them, I will stick them inside the packet that we give them. So they go home with the patient. So after you fill out the application, head over to the nurse's desk and ask if you can fax a form. Usually not a problem. They'll say, come around to the desk and they'll show you where the fax is. And try to get a fax confirmation so you can bring the application and the fax confirmation back and put it into the packet that has all the other great pathways for change information. Victim comp requires at least the forensic kit completed. If they do not have the forensic kit, then we cannot fill out the application form. We just provide support. And if they down the line decide to report the crime, either to the police or get a restraining order, then pathways, they can schedule a meeting with the counselor and the counselor can help them fill out the 4-page form. And all the paperwork should go in the folder that you're giving to the patient. We cannot collect any of that information. We cannot accidentally take that information home. So be very cautious about making sure it gets in the packet that you're going to give to the patient. If no application has been completed, it's because there was no kit done, because the patient didn't want to or couldn't do the kit. So sometimes the kit isn't done if the patient can't give consent. Sometimes they're still drunk or given a sedative when they arrive to the hospital, and SANE won't be able to do the kit. They might be able to come back later to do the kit if it's still within the 120 hours, but they're not going to be able to do the kit right then and there. So please do not do the application unless we're for sure going to have the kit done. Let the patient know that a counselor can schedule a meeting to help them complete the application, fax it from our office if it's not done at the hospital. The short victim comp form is only for the be completed in the hospital, and the long form is for all other times. So each kit, especially in sexual assault cases, has a unique identification number, pre-printed stickers, and that's for tracking because again, the kits will not have the patient's name on it. The kits will only have this unique number. It's the only way survivors will be able to learn about the evidence collection. So place one of the stickers on the victim comp application, place another sticker on the inside of the aftercare booklet that we provide, place at least one more on the inside of the folder, but not on the folder itself. Try to find some other paper in there because the folders have a smooth coating on them and things don't stick to them very well. And remember again, SANE cannot leave the kit once the box is open. SANE may need to ask you to go to the nurse's station for food or drink for the patient, a warm blanket, some sterile scissors, an empty blood vial because they're expired in the kit. Because the kits do expire. The paperwork doesn't, but the vials that are in there for collecting samples does. And so they're not going to throw the whole kit out. They're just going to replace those vials. And they might need your help because, again, they can't leave once that kit is open. And although you may need to fax the victim comp form for the patient, I'm asking you not to fax other materials that SANE may ask you to, because that is part of their job. That is part of the legal process. And if something goes wrong and it didn't get to where it needs to go, then that'll be your fault. And that is not a burden we want anybody to have to deal with. We're there to support the patient and help the process, not faxing paperwork for the SANE nurses. The aftercare booklet is an essential tool for the advocate and patient alike. This has all the steps needed to take after leaving the hospital and what the advocate will need to fill out the information. We're going to include the kit number. We're going to include who is present. So sometimes in the trauma of having to go to the hospital, they may not remember who the doctor's name was, who the SANE's name was, who even your name was. So we're going to document that in the aftercare booklet. And if there's any future appointments or timeframes, for instance, if they're given a two-step after emergency contraception, they may take one at the hospital, but they might have to take another one in 24 hours. And so we would jot that down in the aftercare booklet for them. And this is the cover of the aftercare booklet. And they're much bigger now. They're full 8x11 documents. And this is the page that I was mentioning, the inside cover that we put the kit number on right at the top. And here's the section where you'd be writing what hospital they went to, who's the staff they interacted with, what your name was, who was the same. And then there's some follow-up numbers. So if they are given the PEP medication, we ask them the hospital asked them to follow up with Linda O'Reilly, who is the infectious diseases person for the state. And those are the numbers. And if they're a young person, if they're under the age of 17 years old, there's a separate number for them to call. But Linda O'Reilly, they'll leave the hospital with maybe a week's worth of the PEP medication. But they're going to have to take that PEP medication for a week's time. And it's very expensive. It costs thousands of dollars. So Linda O'Reilly and her team are going to help them find out ways to pay for it because some insurance won't let them pay for that. And we do this because, again, trauma brain, right? It's hard to remember some steps. And so we're going to use this to help document some things for them. And then page 4 starts where we add the following information. If they're taking PEP, the dates that you're going to take the PEP at the same time every day. So the date and the time that they're going to be taking the PEP. And then again, a reminder in there to call Linda Riley. And then if they're going for STI testing or other prophylaxis, emergency contraception, all these get documented if we have that information. If we don't have the information, then we can't document it, but pointed out that that's there for them, just in case they need that. And towards the back of the pages, we can add some notes. And there's some I put some lines in there. So and we do this because sometimes there might be other information that they need. And so we can document like, don't forget to call Pathways, and I'm going to follow up with you in 2 days and check and see how you're doing. So we're going to do that follow-up call to them. So when you're leaving the facility, text the dispatcher that you're heading home. And again, this is a requirement as part of our safety policy. And you're always welcome to text when you arrive home. But the latter does not replace texting when you leave. Make sure you text when you're leaving the facility so we know that you got to your car safe and you're safely driving home and that nothing happened at the hospital. You didn't bump into anybody you shouldn't have bumped into, and that you're nice and safe. Again, we cannot transport survivors in their own vehicles, in our own vehicles or in their vehicles. A survivor needs transportation, ask the hospital first, as they may have resource. If the hospital cannot help, we have a private conversation with the Pathways dispatcher. So leave the room and go to an area where you're out of earshot and have that conversation with the dispatcher saying, listen, the hospital can't get them home. They got here a different way and they need to get home. And then we may be able to call Red Cab. Say if they're in Gardner and they need to get home to Southbridge, we don't have a Red Cab company who can drive those distances. New Red Cab is who we use for Worcester, and it would go Worcester and the surrounding areas like Auburn and Millbury and Leicester and Spencer and so forth. And then we have use city cabs in the Fitchburg area, which Leominster, Gardner helps them. You can't go from Fitchburg to Worcester necessarily. So we are limited on that's why we say, please have a quiet conversation. Don't tell the patient, I'm going to get you a ride, because we can't guarantee that. And we cannot provide rideshare rides. So do not call a rideshare for the patient, because we cannot reimburse you for that, and we cannot guarantee that's safe. Okay, so we can't reimburse you for the ride share because it's not allowed in our contract. So if you don't report that you went on a call either to the police station or to the hospital, then we can't report it to the state, so it might as well not have happened. It's important that you record into the Empower database that you made a call to the facility before you left your house, the advocacy response, and then any significant others that were there. We need you to code them in the Empower database as well. We also have an advocacy form. We've got to fill out one out for the survivor, and if there's one significant other, then one other. If there's 5 significant others, then 5 others. So each form has to have a different person documented on it. And then you email it to Linda and let Linda know the next day if the client's requesting services, and let Linda know the next day that you went on a call and when you're going to be doing the backup call. If you can't do the backup call, then let her know that you can't do the backup call, and we'll find somebody to do the backup call. And while you're on the advocacy response, collect names and phone numbers to offer the check-in as even of the significant others if they're interested. And that way you'll have all that information to add to the Empower database. And here's the advocacy form. It's electronic fillable. it's a little tricky because the field's a little too small. I've got to redo it hopefully for next year, and it'll be a little bit easy to use, but. So for any counselor, advocate, or educator, we all need 1 hour of counseling team meetings per month. And that's because we're not licensed therapists. We're peer support counselors. So even if you are a therapist, you're not doing therapy in your role as a rape crisis counselor. So that attending one counsel team meeting per month allows you to keep your status as a rape crisis counselor. And then each year, we all need to do 6 hours of additional trainings. I'm a social worker, so I get probably over 120 hours a year of additional training. Any trainings that are offered by Pathways, and then I'll email out some trainings. Like to email free trainings. Some people also might, if they're taking some classes in school, they might qualify. Not all classes. If you're going to take a training or a class and you want them to count towards your additional trainings as a rape crisis counselor, talk to me first and I'll let you know if they'll qualify. Otherwise, I send probably hundreds out every year, so getting the 6 hours shouldn't be a heavy lift at all. Here's a dispatcher number, so make sure you get all these numbers in your phone. I'm going to give you a chance to pause this. So you have the dispatcher number in your phone, you have Linda's number in your phone, you have my number in your phone, you have Stephanie's and Luciana's number in your phone. So any one of these folks could be calling you to dispatch you for advocacy. All right, so pause this if you need to. And if you have any questions, you can call me, you can text me, you can email me. Ask those questions. I know you're all very smart and you're going to come up with a lot of great things to ask. All right. I want to thank you very much for attending this training, and I hope it gives you all the information that you need. And no, not alcohol is going to go like this, but hopefully this will prepare you. All right. I'll look forward to your questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.